Hello, I'm Elizabeth Lumley, and we're here for a special FinTech Talents Fireside Chat. So joining me today is Colin Lyons of Us2. How are you?
I'm well.
We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and a topic that is not unfamiliar to anyone who works in FinTech or financial services, especially over the past 10 years, and that's digital transformation. You know, there are a lot of projects going on. I'm sure a lot of people watching us have this chat have been involved in some of these digital transformation projects. But recently, there's been a little bit of a feeling in the air that a lot of these projects are really just theater or aren't really going anywhere. So why does it seem like so many digital transformation projects sort of stagnate?
Well, I think you're right to say that it does feel a bit like theater. And I think the reason for that is because people are recognizing the need to innovate. They recognize there's a lot of competition in the world, and that they need to engage in this area of innovation. Challenge for them is that they don't necessarily understand how to do that well. So I think there are some aspects of innovation that, to work in that kind of context, they need to be more sensitive and aware of. But actually, before we go down that path, I think it's probably worth making a distinction, because I think in the world of financial services, the language of innovation can actually refer to two things that are quite different, or even digital transformation for that matter. One of them is looking at the fact that they have these legacy systems that have been running the banks for decades, and there's been a lack of investment in those systems, and bringing those up to par is part of what some organizations refer to as digital transformation. Okay. Rightfully so. However, that can be conflated with another thing which is quite different, which is to innovate, to actually make things that are new. And the truth of the matter is both are important. You can't really do the new stuff when you've got this creaky old stuff that is preventing you from being able to leverage new technologies, integrate with these new platforms and so on. So I think it's worthwhile making that distinction. And I think there's not really a lot to say about the legacy upgrade process, because it's pretty well defined. It's really a matter of playing catch up for all the decades of not investing in the systems that they've been using to run the banks. So if we put that aside for a second and we talk about making new things, I think one of the big challenges that organizations face is not understanding how do you measure and breed an environment to make successful outcomes from innovation and expenditure or investment. So it's going to be more concrete, but what I mean, when you're trying to innovate and create new digital products, the measures of progress, for instance, are very different than what you might be used to in running an organization's, on a day-to-day basis, kind of the business as usual type activities. So if you create a new financial product, as an example, the way you would measure success is, how many people you have using the product, how much revenue you're making from it, how profitable is it? And those are very reasonable things in the space of innovation, but you can't ask those questions too early, because innovation, it's a nice, sexy sounding word, but the truth of the matter is it's actually all about experimentation. Right. And so when you're running experiments, you have to recognize that an experiment means you don't know the outcome. If you knew the outcome, it's not an experiment, right? And in fact, that's paraphrasing something that Jeff Bezos said.
I think banks hate more than not knowing the outcome.
It's really different to their culture to have this notion that you're going to do something and you don't actually know what's going to happen. And as I was saying, Jeff Bezos used that exact language, saying you cannot separate innovation from experimentation, and experiments mean you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and therefore you're going to have failure. And so I think that's one of the big challenges for financial service organizations particularly, but it's happening in lots of large organizations as well. But financial services organizations are very much attached to direct correlation between investment and return on investment. So I think that's one big one. And I think another one is finding the right kind of people to lead these innovation ideas and experiments, is because you have the idea of an entrepreneur. I think that's a term that kind of got real popularity.
We'll be talking about that later.
Okay. It got real popularity in the 80s. I think it was a time when there was a real recognition that there was something about bringing entrepreneurial spirit into the corporate environment. And so you had these people who were mavericks and wanted to kind of make things happen, but they were inside the corporate structure and they were seen as people who could bring an entrepreneur mindset into the environment. And I think what we've learned over all that time is that there is a real difference between being an entrepreneur and being an intrapreneur. And I think when you're trying to find leadership for these types of programs, these innovation programs, that can be a challenge, is how do you find the people who have the right level of hunger the right level of leadership, understand having a product mindset, which that's the whole topic we can touch on if you like. I think all of those things are making it difficult for these large organizations to be successful, and therefore has the look of theater, when in fact I think there's genuine interest. I think it's not playing out the way people expected.
So there's a lot to unbundle there.
Okay.
I'm gonna start with what you brought up first.